every year you have a multi-faith service around 9/11. People pick at your church. You also spend a lot of time speaking to Muslims and and having dialogue with Muslims. Why do you do that?
Well, not only Muslims, but also Buddhists, Sikhs. We have Sikhs worshiping at our church right now, and of course Jews, every religion we've engaged with, because we all speak about God. We all speak about that spiritual path. We speak about the divine, we speak about the sacred. And that's a beautiful topic of conversation, and it's one we all share.
A lot of your multi-faith work is also about being inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
If you and many other Christians believe that the only way to real salvation is through Christ, how can you engage fully in interfaith work?
Well, the only way to God for me is through Jesus Christ. Now, that doesn't say anything about you, and it doesn't say anything about my other brothers and sisters on this planet. They may find their own paths to God. Buddhists have so much to teach us. Muslims have so much to teach us. Jews have so much to teach us, obviously, about our own faith as well as their faiths. This is how we grow as spiritual beings. And even more importantly, I think, for Christians, is that theological tenet that Jesus will come again. We say in our communion services, we say, Christ has died, Christ has risen, Christ will come again. But we have no clue as to how Christ will come again. We don't know if Christ will come as a Muslim, as a Buddhist, again as a Jew, as a Wiccan, as an atheist.
A lot of people would find what you just said very heretical.
Well, I don't see why. I think Christ does call to us in the world right now. Not even talking about Revelation and Apocalypse, but right now Christ calls to us from the world through our brothers and sisters of other faiths, particularly, I think, in the West these days, through our Muslim brothers and sisters, because, Islam is the new devil in the West, and we're fighting Islam. Well, this is horrible, this is horrendous, and all Christians everywhere should be outraged by this.
You say in the book that to be inclusive is to suffer. Why?
Well, Jesus did. There's the first example. But it's not going to be easy. It's not easy to welcome difference into your life. It's not easy to accommodate the crack addict and the child. It's not easy for people of a certain age to share a washroom with a transgendered person who's 6'4" and to them is sick, just mentally sick. It's not easy to change. It's not easy to be challenged, to have our views of the Bible challenged. It's not easy for anyone to build real community. This is a difficult task. It's a loving task. It's a beautiful task. But it's not an easy task, and it does involve some suffering. And particularly to be a church of the poor, to welcome the very poor and the very suffering into your midst, is to invite suffering yourself. Of course it does, because suffering and poor people die. They simply die more often than well-to-do and middle-class people. So in our church, we do a lot of funerals, and we go to a lot of funerals.
Why go through all that suffering?
Because without suffering, no bliss. Because bliss and suffering go hand in hand. And because this is what being human is about, this depth of experience, this joy, this joie de vivre, This is to be human, is to experience the absolute passion. You can't have joy without suffering. You can't have life without death. You can't have birth without disease, and then the grave. You can't have that. That's part of what we come to learn as human beings, having an incredible and beautiful spiritual experience. It's our gift.
You had a person named Dell who was a very, very big part of your congregation. Mm-hmm. Dell also had a huge impact on your faith. Tell me about Dell.
Mm. Well, Dell and I used to eat in this very restaurant together, and I couldn't sit in this restaurant without seeing Dell walking by. So Dell's spirit is very present. Dell was a transgendered male to female. Dell, like many, many, many people, had a horrible toxic experience of church as a young person growing up queer, and was excluded from church and was judged by church and hated by church. So Dell didn't want to have anything to do with church. Dell came for the free meal. But Dell would sit and listen outside the sanctuary to what was going on inside, and probably heard a far worse piano player inside than Dell knew she could be. So I asked Dell if she would play the piano, and that's when Dell came out to me as trans and said, you know, I can't really be a full part of this congregation unless I'm accepted for who I am and who I am as a woman.
You've called Dell a prophet.
Absolutely.
What makes a prophet?
A prophet is someone who brings about a conversion in the one prophesied to. A prophet is the one that tells you things you need to know about the future and the past. A prophet is the one who calls you back again to your faith. And what Dell did for us was call us back to being Christian in the fullest sense of the word. We actually were willing to learn from Dell. We were willing to learn not only about all sorts of issues related to being transgendered and transsexual, we were willing to learn about issues related to addiction and what that looked like. And we were willing to listen and to learn about poverty, all of which Dell represented, as well as great gifts. To me, the prophets always come from the queer margins of society. This is very biblical. That's where the prophets came from always. But this is where these prophets came to our church community.
What happened to Dell?
Dell died of an overdose, as close as we can discover. We're not really sure. What we lost when we lost Dell was a valuable part of our community, and so we commemorated Dell with a wonderful stained glass window. And I said somewhere in some service that we were the only church probably in Christendom that had a stained glass window dedicated to a transsexual person.
You've talked about a lot of death in your life throughout this interview. What do you think will happen to you when you die?
Well, absolutely, I believe in an afterlife. Absolutely, I believe that God is with us, not only in this life, but beyond this life and into the next life. It says beautifully in Romans 8 in the New Testament, it says, where God is, neither powers, nor principalities, nor angels, nor heights, nor depths can keep me from the love of God in Christ Jesus. And I absolutely believe that. So I don't think death will separate me from that love any more than life has. And certainly there is life after this life. That seems to me very clear. And not just from near-death experiences, but simply from the very reality of resurrection in all of our lives. The bigger question to me is there life before death? Not is there life after?
Reverend Cheri DiNovo, thank you.
You're very welcome. A pleasure.